There seems to be a lot of buzz about bees lately. All sorts of discussion about a declining bee population and the effects of pesticides on these insects that are very important to our environment. So, exactly what is happening in the world of bees and why should we be paying attention? Worldwide, bee colony collapse is not as big of a mystery as the chemical industry claims. Tim Broad from Highland Bees shared with us all about his experience working with bees and how pesticides are killing these creatures.
So, of course, bees have a lot of importance. And, the Apis mellifera, the honeybee, of course, gets a lot of attention. But we have alone in Colorado over 900 species of bees, 450 species right here on the Front Range. But bees in general, particularly since the Miocene, for the last 20 million years, have grown up and evolved with plants. If we did not have bees, not talking about the other pollinators, but if we did not have bees, it would be a substantially different landscape than what we see today. Bees are responsible not just for the bounty of lots of different flora, but also for a substantial amount of the foods that we eat. Really three factors that are deeply affecting honeybees. One, pesticides, the prolific use of new kinds of pesticides. Although pesticides aren't new, but we have an unprecedented use of pesticides. We have a diminishing amount of high quality forage. If you look around just in your drive here from campus here, you'll notice that things even a few months ago, any wild forage or fields that you saw are now being gone. So we have lack of forage. And then thirdly, we have increased levels of disease. So it's those interplay of those three factors that are responsible for the declining number of both honeybees and our other native bees.
When I woke here, I was mistaken. So
Bees are easily some of the hardest working creatures on the planet. They possess a work ethic that just doesn't quit. Our lives would indeed be very different if bees did not exist. A couple of interesting facts here. Honeybees, both wild and domestic, perform about 80% of all pollination worldwide. Grains are primarily pollinated by the wind, but fruits, nuts, and vegetables are pollinated by bees. Bees pollinate 70 out of the top 100 human food crops, which supply about 90% of the world's nutrition. Not only is this pollination necessary for the food we consume directly, it's also vital to our food chain. Crops such as field beans, hay, and clover are used to feed the livestock that we depend on for meat. I went to the farmer's market to get different points of views about the declining bee population from people with extensive knowledge in the topic.
One thing is they're using a lot of pesticides to grow grains and things like that that they feed animals. And so they use some really harsh pesticides in a lot of cases to grow these things, to grow meat and chicken and all that kind of stuff. So as far as its connection to climate change, it takes a lot of oil and to make the pesticides and fertilizers to make grow these grains. So they have to protect those grains, so then they make pesticides to kill the insects that hurt those, and that kills the bees. Okay. So in that way it hurts the planet because it uses more oil. It kills off a lot of soil that way because they then cut down forests to grow animals. So all that affects the bees. All of that affects the bees because the massive amount of pesticides, especially used on grains and things like that, and things that would be fed to animals.
So pesticides are one of the chemicals that are used on plants that we eat and plants in our yards. Pesticides are designed to kill all pests. And because pests aren't truly defined, they also affect bees and butterflies and beetles and all of our pollinators. So when people use pesticides in their yards, it affects all of the pollinators as well as the insects that they don't want to affect. And in big agriculture, pesticide affects not only the pests in the field, it affects the soil microbes, and it gets into the waterways and affects the waterways.
You know, when you work closely with any animal or any insect, or particularly with bees, it kind of gives you an appreciation of microcosm, macrocosm. They're such small, little organized creatures that have a very unique situation, and how they interact with the bigger world it really gives you the opportunity to reflect, to go back and forth between small and big. But they really are kind of, linchpins to our entire food system. So I think, in my opinion, it's really safe to say that one of the reasons why bees are having such problems is that it's really reflective of kind of our failed agricultural system. And what that means is, particularly in the last 50, 60 years, we've moved away from smaller farms that were relatively diverse with a lot of mixed forage and mixed crops, to now we have areas that are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles that are monoculture. You know, all corn, all soy, all one single thing, that are heavily pesticided, heavily managed, heavily tilled, and it cannot support diverse insects. So there's good insects, there's bad insects, you know, that good and bad. We'd have to define what good and bad is. But when you have basically a desert of just one particular kind of a plant, and it's being heavily used pesticides to kill off creatures, it kills the good and the bad. So when you have that over decades and decades and we're changing the landscape more and more due to lots of population pressures, etc., then it's a recipe for disaster.
Is to plant plants where you live that are good for the bees. Not necessarily to have a bee tribe, or I mean a bee hive, a bee tribe, yeah, a bee tribe, but to have a garden that has a lot of plants that helps the bees. And plus, that's really nice too, because that helps build the soil of where you're at and puts carbon back into the soil, so we don't lose the bees. And so we don't lose humans. Over 100 scientists are saying that we've got to get off pesticides so we help the bees, and so that we can use less oil, and to help slow down climate change so we even have a planet to live on. Yep.
I think there's a lot of things that all of us as citizens can do to help bees in general. And then the first thing is just to get engaged in the conversation that bees are in trouble. And you can say, oh, it's pesticides, or oh, it's forage, or oh, it's this or that. And it doesn't really matter, because what does matter is that all of those are true. It's a constellation of effects. So get involved by, one, paying attention to how you spend your money. For some people, it might be keeping bees. For other people, it might be helping to create habitat, for native bees. For other people, it might be, well, I have the time, how much grass do I really need around me? Maybe as students, I want to get involved with my university and say, we really don't need as much grass laying around here. It's just huge hydration fields. Nobody can eat it. It doesn't necessarily look that great. Can't we have like wild forage there? Think about what you plant on your property, and that could be whether that is off the balcony of an apartment, or if you have a lawn, you can choose to get rid of part of it, just a small area that's 10 by 10. You can get involved with your city about the kinds of trees that they plant, or about is it really necessary to cut every meridian everywhere? So there's lots of different ways that people can get engaged. One thing that I really urge us all to do is pay attention to how you spend your money. And one of the underbellies to the whole bee crisis is that people are very concerned about bees and then consequently honey, because we all know honey has got a lot of very different, magical, very, very healthy products. But we have no oversight in the rule of honey, and you're allowed to call anything raw, unheated, unfiltered. And it's not true. In my opinion, the vast amount of honey that is sold commercially is at best tainted. It's been heated, it may have been filters, it's had a lot of the high quality ingredients taken out of it to make it shelf stable or to reduce the price. So don't buy cheap honey. Unless it's from your aunt or your uncle or your friend, there's no such thing as cheap honey. And again, it would be kind of akin to going into a diner and thinking that tin of sweet stuff is maple syrup. I want you to know 20 years ago, people thought that was maple syrup. And people will feel that way soon when you go in a grocery store and you can see a jug of inexpensive honey, but it's got all those words on it. You say, oh, I should buy that because it's helpful and honey's good for you. It is not. Buying cheap, adulterated honey is actually an economic underpinning of the bee crisis. And that's one thing all of us can do, is pay attention to that.
Okay, what would you tell people to inspire them to act, to start helping bees more?
Inspiration comes in different ways to each of us. And turn off your televisions, turn off your cable, get involved with your neighbors and your people. When you go for a walk, take a look at the natural world around you, ask questions. We can't continue to ignore that, in fact, our world is in big problem. When I was a kid, there were 3 billion of us on the planet. Now there's 8. In your lifetime, there'll probably be over 25. And if we keep on developing and growing and not paying attention to sustainability and don't confront a lot of these issues about pollinators and bees and land use, the bottom line is we're all in for hardship, big, big hardship. So the bottom line is we must take our heads out of the sand and figure out what is our way to be contributory. And, again, that's based on your time and energy, but there are entry points for every single one of us. It might be doing just straight journalism, or it might be, there's a lot of ways, but you have to get your head out of the sand. And the best way to do that is to turn off your televisions.
Okay. Bees play a major part in our food supply, but they also have other roles in nature. One single bee colony can pollinate 300 million flowers each day. By pollinating flowers, they contribute to the beauty of our floral landscapes and provide attractive habitats for animals, including birds and other insects. The main reason bees are so important to our world is if bees do not pollinate crops, then crops do not grow to produce food that is harvested. Bees need healthy crops, and healthy crops need bees. It's a coexistence that is critical for our food supply and the future of agriculture. The next time you see a bee buzzing around, remember that much of the food we eat depends significantly on natural insect pollination, the key ecosystem service that bees and other pollinators provide.